everyone. So I'll take this look a little bit from a practitioner perspective, and I have some examples later on, some of the specific projects to highlight. But before I do that, I just want to start with things a little bit from the city's bread and butter perspective, which is really around land use planning. We've heard a little bit about that already from our previous two speakers. So obviously land use planning is the primary leverage that cities have to achieve community objectives, and the core policy tools include official community plans, zoning, and other bylaws. But I think there's also a lot of conversations around some of these intangible factors, such as livability, community connectivity, and other such values that are often referenced in these core land use tools, but are often challenging to realize because they can be influenced by things such as the built form, but also by residents, business composition, road network, and other factors. So in Port Moody and other communities in Metro Vancouver, there's been discussions with organizations such as Happy Cities, which is an organization that works with cities to design public spaces, housing, and streets with a focus on well-being. And an elevated discussion, I think, conversations around the importance of the public realm. And I think with the densification of cities, these areas become gathering spaces and living rooms for a lot of people. So I think part of the reason for the elevated narrative around these types of values and qualities is that cities are becoming denser and communities are changing, and the built form alone doesn't necessarily translate into livable communities and strong social bonds. And there's been a lot of the traditional neighborhoods of single family homes or low density areas are becoming disrupted either through densification of these areas or adjacency impacts, and the notion of city life and livability is being reevaluated. Historically, densification in cities in Canada, and I'm assuming a lot of other places in North America as well, has been disproportionately been on the shoulders of only certain neighborhoods. And so single family home areas were at times actually used to exclude people. So for example, in Chinatown, Vancouver, this neighborhood started as the only place where people of Chinese descent could actually live and work, and they're prevented from living in other neighborhoods. Some cities in the US, excuse me, implemented de facto exclusionary zoning after the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1960s to prohibit people of certain races to live in certain areas. And this is really achieved by the type of housing form that was allowed in particular zones. For example, some neighborhoods only allowed single family homes, while others only allowed multi-family dwellings. I'm just going to pop up a slide here. There's an article in the New York Times. There's an article in the New York Times that, sorry, just popping this up right now. This article in the New York Times from 2019 that outlined how much certain cities in the States were zoned for detached single-family homes. So New York City was only at 15%, but LA was at 75%. So the pink areas are the areas where single-family homes are zoned for single-family homes. LA is at 75%, Portland's at 77%, Charlotte, whoops, where did Charlotte go? Is at 84%, and Arlington at 89%. So the article estimated that about 75% of residential land in many American cities were allocated for single-family homes. So closer to home, this on the left is a zoning map of the city of Vancouver, and the yellow areas are areas that are largely zoned for single-family homes. And on the right is where I'm working, and my hometown is Port Moody here. And the beige areas are largely areas where largely single-family homes are only allowed. So in both cases here, is consistent with what we're seeing in a lot of other municipalities where there is the predominant land use is for single-family homes. However, this is changing. The British Columbia government has passed legislation to require minimum density around rapid transit hubs and frequent bus service areas that in many municipalities will reach into lower density neighborhoods. The province is also allowing laneway homes to be built in single-family lots. Minneapolis was the first large city in America to end single-family zoning. So there's a shift in this thinking, and why this is important is though it takes time for policy to materialize into on-the-ground change, the pending disruption to neighborhoods traditionally untouched by development requires asking the question on how to build communities and not just housing amenities. Another sort of theme that's been percolating more with cities is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think this recognition that equality doesn't mean equity. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the distinction between the two, but as an example is giving shoes to everyone, regardless of whether it fits or not, is an example of equity, is an example of equality, but giving everyone a shoe that fits and that they can actually use is an example of equity. So conceptually, the equality versus equity distinction is really a distinction between outputs and outcomes and parallels community development. So livable communities is outcome based on equity versus, say, building housing units, which is more of an output. So taking this back into the themes of today's discussion around sustainable living and shifting demand in systemic ways, OneEarth Living has long talked about sustainable living. I'm going to pull up this phrase here, gaman, which is not what OneEarth uses. It's a term I'm using to apply to this discussion. So gaman is a Japanese term for, it means enduring something quite unbearable with dignity and patience, and it originated from Buddhism. So really, it's not a particularly appealing way to try to live one's life if one is looking at trying to live sustainably. So OneEarth has really focused on trying to live a good life and reframing what that means around social connectivity, community resilience, culture, and personal growth. Oops, which way are we going here? So the outcomes approach to community development is important as they impact life transitions, quality of life, and can help ground communities as places comprised of citizens and consumers and help people achieve the good life. So while the IPCC report indicate Canada be hard pressed to get to net zero or be a positive contributor due to transportation, housing realities, cities can provide opportunities through outcomes-focused community development to enable them to be contributors to addressing climate change and live more sustainably and recognize that there is positive momentum. And I think just, again, that reframing livability around emphasizing social connections in this changing urban situation here. So just going back to the implications of urban design around day-to-day living, and then start moving into some of these examples. So viability micromobility is really recognizing the degree of comfort or discomfort in the first and last mile portions of a commute and how that can play a significant role in the selection of travel mode and how to bridge this gap through the provision of options such as micromobility. Cities are placing more emphasis on walkability and urban design, and this can help supplement the use of active transportation, micromobility, car share use, and transit as more sustainable modes of transportation as opposed to a personal vehicle. Cities can also provide economies of scale that can enable initiatives such as share, use, repair to be viable, not only from a financial perspective, but also operationally. So ensuring there's not a material drop-off in the level of service that a user is seeking, but rather it's really filling a market gap and it's not based on people feeling obligated to participate because it may be the right thing to do. So a lot of this work that cities are undertaking are based on partnerships, and cities are really well tuned to work in partnerships. There's a lot of core city services such as transit, road networks, water, sewer that are formed on partnerships already. And I think that the partnerships are really important because it just, cities have maybe legislative constraints from offering programs and services that are directed toward a particular stakeholder group. They're typically more risk averse, and that cities, need to be respectful of these legislative requirements and also the fiduciary aspect of being a city. So the partnership aspect is really where nonprofits are a key enabler of partnerships, as well as businesses and other core sort of entities that work with cities, such as developers. So nonprofits, what they can do is they can bring expertise, network with stakeholders across the sector, collect and aggregate on-the-ground information, and aren't necessarily geographically constrained as cities might be. And the nonprofit sector in Canada is extremely robust, and that's probably the reason why we've seen so much success with partnerships between government and NPOs in Canada. There's estimated about 80,000 charities and over 100,000 nonprofits in Canada, and they contribute about $30 billion towards the Canadian economy, or almost 1.4%. So it's a very, very strong sector in the country. Cities, the benefit for cities in these partnerships, it can diffuse risk for any one entity. They can get buy-in from stakeholders to enable programming, cost sharing, and there's opportunities to test. So cities, they typically work through project-focused processes, and some of these types of programs or initiatives may require more iterative processes, and so that's where partnerships and nonprofits can take some of that initiative. So I just want to jump to some examples that we worked on while I was with the Strathcona Business Improvement Association. Partnering with Recycling Alternative and with member businesses to conduct waste audits and pilot commercial waste collection services, and provide education well in advance of the pending Metro Vancouver regulations around waste diversion. So these types of programs led to material difference in our member businesses being compliant with waste regulations when they were implemented compared to other parts of the city when businesses did not have the same access to the resources. This spun into a micro-industrial composting project with support from Metro Vancouver and the City of Vancouver that saw a collection of organics generated from BIA businesses and with the output recirculated into the local economy for food growing programs. I also conducted a study of active transportation opportunities in the neighborhood in support of City of Vancouver objectives, with the goal of trying to expedite implementation of active transportation projects. So there's obviously a bunch of other examples that cities are currently leading the way in, and another example is around nature-based solutions, sometimes in partnerships with developers to ensure things such as bioswales are installed to enable more natural runoff of water, rather than in storm events directing large volumes of runoff into storm sewers and culverts. And this can impact the viability of local urban creeks for fish and vertebrate habitats. And then another theme that we've talked about a little bit today is just around the public realm. So ensuring there's adequate tree coverage to support livable public spaces in all seasons. So just before I end, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some community economic development implications. And so another project that we're working on through the BIA was just around benevolent associations and local retail. So a project here was just with the City of Vancouver to work with benevolent associations, and many of them are they're comprised of aging board of directors, and the buildings are in historical areas, so they were also in need of repair and infrastructure improvements. They often have retail at grade. So this project was really intended to partner the Benevolent Association, the city, and the BIA to re-energize local and legacy retail to help businesses and strengthen the finances of the association to continue operations and invest in building infrastructure. So this is an example of one of the success projects is with Kamwai Dim Sum in Chinatown, and you can see on the left here the business owner who was an excellent partner in this project, and the right is an example, or is a photo of sort of like the after shot of how much the frontage has been revitalized, and the business continues to be successful. So just in conclusion here, I just want to end by saying, there are implications of how we explore what economic development means when we're looking at building cities for people, and in a more outcome-focused land use planning, focusing on social connections and equity and these other good life outcomes. And it can change what we value what kind of goods and services are provisioned to meet not just the material needs, but social needs. And then this really ties into what kind of partnerships that cities can pursue, not only for economic prosperity, but also for public service and community outcomes. So thank you very much.